This is nice and warm. It feels good. Another thing I appreciate about this morning in Sunday school, Janet read a devotional that she had, and she read one of the stories that I was going to talk about. And so I appreciate these connections that can happen in a church service like this. So we've talked a lot about light lately, but I'm challenged by the notion of light. We had the true light last week in our bulletin. We had the Christmas Eve service where we held up our lights. And I'm not done talking about light yet, so bear with me. Typically in the fall and winter, I'm sorely aware of less daylight. Less time to do things outside, less warmth from the sun, the nagging reminder that life's seasons and summer never last all year long, and the harbinger of our own mortality as we see everything green dying around us and slipping into decay. So even long before winter and Christmas, I've been thinking about light. I think it started in one of our Sunday school classes. I remember reading a song, and it was a song referencing light, and I thought, there's more to this light thing than I realized. Also, as we're reading through the Bible chronologically, I realized that I found myself noticing those references to light, and not only just about Jesus, but other places in the Bible. So light became a theme for me throughout the Bible reading. So what are some of the connections between references to light throughout the Bible? In movies, you know that you have this movie, and then a couple years later, you have a sequel to that movie, and sometimes those sequels go on forever. Now, in recent years, you not only have the movie, you also have the prequel. So you have the story before the story. So if Christ is the light of the world, if that's the main feature, what's the prequel? So what are some of these connections between references to light throughout the Bible? So that's my focus today. First of all, I'll introduce my reader. She is standing up there. So you will hear this reading, this angelic voice, reading different scriptures as I go through. And that's where it's at. So everybody turn up there and say hi to Annie.
Hi.
So how do we get to John 1, 1 through 5?
John 1, 1 through 5. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.
As strong as this passage is on its own terms, what's the deeper connections that illuminate the light of Christ? I'm also interested, as I've been thinking about this, I'm interested in the interplay between light as symbolic, right, which is what Annie read in John, and physical light. The star over Bethlehem wasn't the only time God's light became actual light. So consider Jesus' transfiguration, for example. So is there more to light that's instructive to us? So in many ways, this sermon is a research paper. Humor me by tolerating some of my questions. And we will go through some things throughout the Old Testament at light speed. And so hopefully you can find some connections maybe you hadn't realized before. I know I did. And then together we can realize a little bit more fully the glory of God revealed through light, and not only at Christmas time. So in order to start the beginning of the story, you have to start at the beginning.
Genesis 1, 1 through 2. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters.
God began by creating the heavens and earth. Now this is mentioned prior to what we call the days of creation, which begin in verse 3. It also gives us a glimpse of the contrast that typically happens when we talk about light, and that contrast is towards darkness. So light's one of those notions that's best understood in comparison to its counterpart, which is darkness. So this dynamic happens all the time, love and hate, rich and poor, hungry, filled, war, peace. We can understand love without understanding hate, but the punch comes in the comparison. And so here's a question I'm going to ask you, and you can reply out loud. When you think of the darkness that Annie read about in John 1, about the passage of Jesus being the light that shines in our darkness, what's the darkness represent? Anybody?
Evil.
What's that?
Evil.
Evil?
Confusion.
Confusion?
The absence of the presence of God.
Absence of God? The presence of God?
Injustice.
Injustice. Okay, you guys have lots of different darknesses out there.
Sleep.
Sleep? What you said? Sleep?
Sleep.
Are those the same darkness that happens in verse 2 of Genesis?
Verse 2 from the Message version. Earth was a soup of nothingness, a bottomless emptiness, an inky blackness.
One of the things I've learned in this study is to pay attention to the type of darkness the light contrasts to. We need to understand the darkness and the light. In verse 2, which Annie read, I don't think we're necessarily talking about sin, darkness, or despair, or injustice, or are we? Is that what we're talking about back in verse 2 of Genesis? Rather, the darkness as emptiness, nothingness, even KJ, the absence of God. I don't know, God just created it. I don't know. So, with all the sights and sounds and the multitasking and the busyness, it's hard for us to even know what emptiness is. Right? But we often think it's something to be avoided. So in this emptiness and nothingness, God takes the next step and begins what's referred to, as I said, the days of creation. We have heaven and the earth is empty, covered with darkness. So what's the very first object of creation?
Genesis 1, 3 through 5. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness God called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day.
So if I were to give you the days of creation and all the objects that are created each day, would you really put light first? Remember, in God's mystery, the sun, moon, stars, they don't occur until day 4. So what's this light? Is this God's way of saying the foundation of the universe is light? Or is God setting up this cosmic struggle between good and evil in some symbolic level from the very beginning? Is that what this is? The footnote in my Bible says that God may have simply created the day-night cycle in order, therefore, the first day had to be called day, and at some point day ends and then night starts. So in order to get this cycle going, this day-night cycle, you got to have light and dark. Maybe that's all it is. I don't know. There might be a better explanation out there. For our purposes, I will simply suggest that order implies significance. And the light created on the first day becomes the anchoring point of things to come. Okay, one final point about light in the creation account. I think we can assume that this is actual physical light that we're talking about. There's plenty of symbolism here, but it's actual light you can see. And that light is not from the sun and the moon.
Exodus 10, 21 through 23. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand towards the sky so that darkness spreads over Egypt, darkness that can be felt." So Moses stretched out his hand towards the sky, and total darkness covered all Egypt for 3 days. No one could see anyone else or move about for 3 days. Yet all the Israelites had light in the places where they lived.
The next time light's mentioned in the Bible is in the 9th plague, a key moment in the Israelites' struggle from slavery in Egypt. This particular plague is quite odd. I don't know if you've thought about it before. First of all, this is no ordinary darkness. The message says the darkness so dark you can touch it. Have you ever experienced darkness like that? I don't think I have. Maybe in a cave or an Nile cavern or something. The passage says that the Egyptians could not see each other, could not leave their place on account of the darkness. What happened to their lamps and candles and their cell phone flashlights? What happened to all that stuff? That stuff stopped working? Is that part of what happened? Has God made all that stuff stop? Doesn't say. Yet, all the Israelites had light in their places where they lived. There's light over there, but there's not light here. And in fact, it's so dark here you can't even, I don't know. And how long does this darkness last? 3 days. It's the only plague lasting 3 days. And it's mentioned twice. It says it twice, 3 days. So from our perspective on history, we might be thinking, there's strong parallels to Jesus' 3 days in the tomb. I don't know. Of course, in Jewish history, the number 3 has a lot of references. But this is very early in the story. And the Israelites and the patterns are still developing. So you might want to do your own research paper and give a sermon on the significance of the number 3 in Jewish history. But finally, again, God uses actual light and the absence of light as a key point in Jewish history to establish his God's story.
Exodus 13, 20 through 22. After leaving Succoth, they camped at Etham on the edge of the desert. By day, the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people.
Notice the use of light by God continues to get more personal for the Israelites. Now light is providing comfort, presence, direction on their path through the wilderness.
Exodus 25, 31 through 37. Make a lampstand of pure gold. Hammer out its base and shaft, and make its flower-like cups, buds, and blossoms of one piece with them. 6 branches are to extend from the sides of the lampstand, 3 on one side and 3 on the other. 3 cups shaped like almond flowers with buds and blossoms are to be on one branch, 3 on the next branch, and the same for all 6 branches extending from the lampstand. And on the lampstand there are to be 4 cups shaped like almond flowers with buds and blossoms. 1 bud shall be under the first pair of branches extending from the lampstand, a 2nd bud under the 2nd pair, a 3rd bud under the 3rd pair, 6 branches in all. The buds and branches shall all be one piece from the lampstand, hammered out of pure gold. Then make it 7 lamps and set them up on it so that they light the space in front of it.
In building the tabernacle, God says, have them make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell with them. The lampstand provides light for the priests. In this act, light is directly connected to worship. No longer does light just happen around us or in front of us. Now the people of God use light to enter God's presence in a personal and responsive act of worship. When Job comes along, the book is filled with references to light and darkness, representing Job's struggle with tragedy and suffering.
Job 3, 3 through 6. May the day of my birth perish, and the night that said a boy is conceived. That day may it turn to darkness. May God above not care about it. May no light shine on it. May gloom and utter darkness claim it once more. May a cloud settle over it. May blackness overwhelm it. That night may thick darkness seize it. May it not be included among the days of the year, nor entered in any of the months.
At this point in Job's story, it's the beginning of the book, and in his torment, Job refers to light as life itself and darkness as death. And he says he wishes he were never born. It's interesting then at the end of Job when God responds with the same language at the book, or in the book that God uses when he puts Job back in his place.
Job 38, 19 through 20. God said, "What is the way to the abode of light? And where does darkness reside? Can you take them from their places? Do you know the paths up to their dwellings?
in the Psalms, David refers to God's light as a blessing.
Psalm 4, 6 through 7. Many, Lord, are asking, who will bring us prosperity? Let the light of your face shine on us. You have filled my heart with greater joy than with their grain and new wine abound.
Light as a source of strength during difficult times.
Chapter 18, verse 28. You, Lord, keep my lamp burning. My God turns my darkness into light.
And the source of ethical behavior.
19, 7 through 8. The law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. The commands of the Lord are radiant, giving light to the eyes.
The psalmist David dances with images of light, referring to our human struggle while also pointing us towards God's love, as well as giving a nod towards Jesus. I'll mention one more set of references in light to the Old Testament. The prophets called Israel back to God, often using the language of light.
Isaiah 2:5. Come, descendants of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord. Isaiah 60, 19 through 20. The sun will no more be your light by day, nor will the brightness of the moon shine on you. For the Lord will be your everlasting light, and your God will be your glory. Your sun will never set again, and your moon will wane no more. The Lord will be your everlasting light, and your days of sorrow will end. Jeremiah 13, 16. Give glory to the Lord your God before God brings the darkness, before your feet stumble on the darkening hills. You hope for light, but God will turn it to utter darkness and change it to deep gloom.
Good news and harsh news, both are spoken by the prophets in the language of light. So we see this message and images of light deeply rooted in the Old Testament tradition. We see how light originates with God and seems to get more personal as the story develops. Also, light tends to be more symbolic as time passes, and actual physical light is mentioned less. When John testified Jesus as the light of the world, the Jews would have been keenly familiar with all these references, as well as the significance of Jesus' fulfillment of the Old Testament stories and the teachings. Light becomes a vehicle for the story of Jesus to be told, so much so that Jesus takes a manifestation of light. There are many things I think we can learn from this glimpse of light in the Old Testament. First, what we have said about light this morning is mostly symbolic, but I've also been kind of teasing out the physical light and the symbolic light. Some physical light has since physical light has a significant part in the created universe, I believe we can and should appreciate the light around us, for example. Sometimes sunlight can get a bad rap. It's too bright. It causes sunburn. It causes even skin cancer. I know references to skin cancer, or cancer in general, can be ubiquitous. But I also know that did you know the lack of sunlight also causes cancer? Sunlight's been shown to kill certain bacteria in our bodies. It reduces certain skin disorders. It can lower cholesterol and blood pressure, cleanses the blood and blood vessels, increases oxygen in the blood. It builds up our immune systems. It reduces depression. It improves bone health for older folks. Not that we have any of that problem. And it even helps you sleep better by increasing the production of melatonin in your body. Are you getting enough sunlight? Some folks believe, just like plants use photosynthesis to convert sunlight to energy, humans are designed with this complex process of converting sunlight to vitamin D. And vitamin D, as we know, has many health and protective factors. So it's no mystery to me that physical light, one of the foundations of creation, is so integral in our own health and growth. Conversely, death is also a part of life. And light is there.
Psalm 139, 11 through 12. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you.
referring to contrast we mentioned earlier. Is darkness an image you have of death? Recently, I met with a teenage girl whose older brother had recently died tragically. She was struggling with all types of grief. And as often the case with grief, she had spiritual questions about what happened to her brother after he died. These questions came out in her dreams. One reoccurring dream she had started off with her being frightened of things with her brother. But the dream always ended with her and her brother in their room, talking and smiling together. And a warm light shone in the window. She made a point to mention the warm light coming in the window, and it's a beautiful image. I was quick to tell her that she was experiencing the light of God, reassuring her that her brother is with God. I don't know everything about heaven, but I know it includes the warm light of God.
Micah 7:7-8. But as for me, I watch and hope for the Lord. I wait for God, my Savior. My God will hear me. Though I have fallen, I will rise. Though I sit in darkness, the Lord will be my light.
Finally, the author Marianne Williamson echoes some of what KJ said last Sunday. KJ was referring to the times when others looked to him, or to us in general, for light and for direction, and going through challenging times. Marianne Williamson writes,
Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. You are a child of God. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same.
God is the source of light. It began in creation. It weaves through the story. Jesus amplifies that light, and it continues in us. In your light, O God, we see light.
WBTL, we believe in love.